Hello, my name is Rachel Fruin. This is Buzzword Breakdown, blended learning. We're going to discuss what blended learning is. It's a phrase that's become really common in education language, particularly with the pandemic, but other words such as hybrid and remote learning and tech integration have become really popular too. So we're going to talk about specifically blended learning, what it is, and how we can apply it in our classrooms. As I mentioned, my name is Rachel Fruin. I was a high school math teacher for 15 years. And in 2016, I actually piloted an algebra class that we called Blended Algebra 1. Students came to class 2 or 3 days a week. And then the other time, they got to learn anywhere. They could be on campus in the cafeteria or the library or hallways. And they could even leave campus. Some students would walk to Starbucks or walk home for the period and come back to school after their algebra class was over. So on those days, I would create remote assignments, asynchronous assignments for students to do through our LMS Canvas. And then on the days when everyone was in class, we would have our traditional lessons. Students were also welcome to come ask for help during the times when they didn't have to be in class. So there was that opportunity for extra help that students were able to take advantage of as well. So that's me. That's a little bit of my background and why I love talking about this buzzword phrase. This recording is brought to you by Dell Technologies and our state partnership with Texas, the Dell Texas Learning Network. I'm with ALP, Advanced Learning Partnerships, and here are our values. Our outcomes for this session: to uncover misconceptions and to find blended learning. All right, so I have an article. If we were together in person or if people were joining via Zoom and we had a room full of people, we would do a Connect, Extend, Challenge protocol for reading an article. But instead, I'm just going to click on the link and give us an overview, the history of blended learning. When did it start? Why do we see a picture of old school desks, old school desks? So this article talks about 1840s being the beginning, where their first distance course was implemented. Then we talk about 1960s and 70s with computers, 1970s and 80s, TV-based technology supported trainings, not just for schools, but in organizations and companies too, when there had to be mass education of a new tool or a new procedure. People implemented the TV-based approach. CD-ROMs became a thing in the 80s and 90s. And then in 1998, that was the first generation of web-based instruction. So blended learning goes way back. And 2000 until now, when we talk about blended learning, we talk about combining face-to-face instruction and technology-based instruction. So there's a little bit of a history for you, taking it way back. Here's a image to consider. We've got traditional classrooms over here in purple and online learning in blue. And the combination of those is what is blended learning. So consider the icons that are presented, people together sitting at a table or virtually, like we've become familiar with in our remote work environments. You've got a physical calendar. You've got flexibility of time, where the teacher is on the screen or in front of the screen. Students working independently at a table or independently at a device. So these are some things to notice and consider, to wonder about. Just try to stretch your imagination. Think of the first distance course. So the first time a course was delivered via TV or CD-ROM. What were the conditions that led to those inventions of new educational practices being implemented? Think about what are the conditions now. yes, the pandemic, yes, having experienced remote learning, but also access to technology. We have the opportunity to put devices in students' hands. So what can we do with that? How can we take the best of the classroom and the best of online instruction to deliver quality instruction for our students? Oops, I just keep clicking on that Jamboard here. So here's another image to notice and wonder. Think about blended learning as a recipe. We've got the same ingredients, but the ingredients, how we use them might change on a daily or weekly basis. We want to have some digital content. We want to have some collaborative work, some formative and summative assessments, whole group instruction, independent, small group instruction. We can take these components and rearrange them to fit our content and our students' needs. You might have students work independently, then do a lab, then work with a partner, then small group, and finally do a summative or a formative or summative assessment. Maybe you start off with a formative assessment, then do whole group instruction, then the lab. Maybe after the lab, you do some small group work, or students go straight to the next formative assessment. So there's all these different pathways, and you don't have to do the same pathway every day or every week. You can kind of mix and match these components. If we were in person, I would love to hear what misconceptions you hear about blended learning. As an education consultant, when I tell people what blended learning is, or that I consult with education technology, they imagine students just sitting in front of a screen by themselves, just like headphones on, plugged in, not engaged with the teacher, not engaged with peers. But I'm sure there's plenty of other misconceptions we hear around blended learning. So just be mindful of those. As you are trying to implement blended learning in your class, what are the misconceptions of the people around you? Those misconceptions might inhibit what you're trying to accomplish if we don't name them and call attention to them. So this quote describes blended learning as creative. So think about the history of blended learning. Like, how did we get creative with the way we delivered instruction? How did we get creative with the way we engage students with technology? How do we get creative when students have to quarantine or be absent? How do we get creative when students are isolated for any other reasons, weather or anything really? How is blended learning fun and exciting? What can we do to engage students that is fun, that is exciting, that's different than what they're used to, that's different than what their parents experienced, that acknowledges their interest in video games and coding and technology and social media? And how is blended learning more beneficial? Because to be honest, it could be creative and fun and exciting, but if it isn't beneficial, then we've got to reevaluate why we're doing it. So blended learning might be more beneficial because students have access to more content. Think about how much they could research. Think about how many more resources they have available to them when they're learning something new. Think about all the different ways that they can demonstrate their learning, that they're not restricted to art skills when they're making a physical poster, that they can include digital media, that they can, some students could type or write their understanding. Other students might want to make a video and verbally describe their understanding. So students have more ways to communicate with the content that they understand, and with the teacher, they can communicate their understanding. They have more ways to communicate with their peers, and then with the outside world to be able to communicate with experts in a field as they're in the process of learning. So when you think about blended learning, what it is, why we do it, consider why. Why are we blending learning? What do you want students, parents, colleagues, administrators, and your community to know about blended learning? Oftentimes when we as educators innovate and push forward in the ways that we engage students, in the ways that we teach curriculum, in the ways that we empower students. People, parents, adults who didn't learn that way kind of question like, what's going on? Why are you doing this? I didn't have to learn this way. Why are kids learning this way? And so we can be proactive by talking about the benefits ahead of time. So why are you blending learning in your classroom? And what do you want the community to know about that? How is that going to help students, and how can you communicate that proactively instead of in response to getting questions or parents being upset or not understanding things like that? In this webinar, I wanted to practice both blended learning in a traditional classroom, right, with pencil and paper, and in an online environment. So earlier, I had a Jamboard, and if we were participants in a classroom, I would have you engage with the Jamboard, share your thoughts in a public forum. But then to model traditional classroom practices are still important. I have this prompt to write for 3 minutes about what blended learning means to you, and consider those itty bitty baby steps to blend learning for your students. And let that be an internal reflective practice that doesn't have to be shared on a public forum. It's not a discussion board post. It's just something for you to take and consider from your own learning, and what this recording is making you pause and think about. And then in order to blend learning, I also encourage teachers to make it authentic. The possibilities with blended learning are huge when you consider the reach of an audience. If students are just performing for their teacher, we know they're just going to try to do the minimum to get the grade they want. But if we're performing for an authentic audience, then we tend to do better. We tend to recognize that we're representing ourselves with our work. So consider, as you watch this recording, what could you share publicly? What could you share about your own learning experience? Maybe you want to respond to one of these prompts via Twitter. I blend learning for my students so that, why? What's the benefit that you see? I blend learning for my students by, how do you do it? Blended learning is a game changer because I used to think blended learning was blank. Now I think blank. So now I will. 3 things I learned today about blended learning are, etc. You can tag me, mention @RachelFruin, tag #ALPLearn, #DTLN for Del Texas Learning Network, and consider how you can make your learning visible. And then consider, in this quick recorded webinar, in what ways did you see flexible pace, place, path, and time? I didn't actually create the space for you to spend 3 minutes writing or to respond in the Jamboard, but think about what facilitator practices might touch on blended learning. Thanks for participating. I hope that you engage in more learning opportunities with us. Have a great day.